This week on No Longer Credentialed, we have a special guest host because Boggsy is currently out of commission with what can only be described as an upper body injury in hockey terms. Okay, people, let's be real. He's on vacation, sipping fruity drinks, playing beach bocce, and snacking on endless supplies of Goo Goo clusters. Since Boggsy's missing out on our 10th episode, a huge milestone for the pod, I have no choice but to eulogize him in the only way I know how. That's right, Kenny Power style. Somebody, cue Far Behind by Candlebox on your boombox.
Don't bury him yet. I'd love to add to the speeches.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Brandon Barca. And if you're here, then you're somebody Boggsy cared about. You're somebody Boggsy loved. Or maybe you're just somebody who has no business being here at all. Who's just here because you think it's going to make you more popular. Like our guest host, Eric Stooche Jones. Everyone's wondering why you're here, EJ. Because you didn't even know Boggsy. Don't worry about it, though. It's cool. No one's complaining. This week's show must go on in Boggsy's honor. He's been holed up lately, listening to the master plan to celebrate the Oasis reunion tour, while scrolling Fish set lists every morning, wondering if they'll ever jam to Tweezer Reprise number 32 in its entirety. You know, Boggsy and I used to F around big time, even though we went to bed at 8:45 every night. We'd party hard at Razoo's in New Orleans, race our golf carts around the arena for hours when we should have been working, printing out more game notes than we ever needed for a media contingent of 3, 2 of which were fanboy blogs. We also watched a lot of cinema films together. He spent most of his time binging the complete series limited edition Blu-ray of The Big Bang Theory. But we also loved the movie Top Gun. And oftentimes we would joke with each other. Who was Goose? Who was Tom Cruise? Well, now that Boggsy has disappeared to some island off the Amalfi Coast, I guess we know who is Goose. Boggsy is Goose. And that would make me Tom Cruise. I'm Tom Cruise, guys. Now everyone, close your eyes. Close your eyes, everybody. Now picture Boggsy's face. Happy, well-manicured facial hair. With a patchy beard he started growing 7 years ago. His body youthful and full of life. Drinking chocolate milk after one of those long runs that leaves each nip raw and streaking. Now picture Boggsy now, up to his ears, with little strands of hair just coming off of his head. Looks all scary, like that little smartass from Tales from the Crypt, the little crypt keeper guy. That's the kind of skeleton that Boggsy is now. Now open your eyes. Everyone, open them. What do you see? You see me. Boggsy now lives through me. I have his power. Not only do I have the power of La Barca in me, I have all of Boggsy's effing powers too. So anyone who wants to step up to this shit better recognize. Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. And don't worry, people. Boggsy will be back on the show next week.
End of intro to funeral speech.
This is the true story of 2 washed-up sports guys who chased the dream, private flights, championship rings, running sideline to sideline on per diem and adrenaline.
We gave our 20s and our 30s to the industry, pulled off miracles that were never in the job description. In return, low pay, long hours, and we still got cut from the team.
This is about what really happens behind the badge, the burnout, the bad bosses, the dream job that didn't love you back, but also the lifelong friendships, the chaos, the holy shit stories you couldn't make up. And somehow, despite everything, you'd still do parts of it all over again.
This is one for the ones who lived it, loved it, hated it, and still kind of miss it. For everyone who's ever asked, how in the hell did we survive that? We're 2 former sports insiders with more than 40 years of experience and more than enough scars to make fun of it all.
And just enough trauma to start a podcast instead of going to therapy.
I'm Brandon Barca.
And I'm Andy Boggs.
And this is No Longer Credentialed. We once had access, now we have opinions. I got to get something off my chest. This one's for all you athletic directors out there. The building is burning. There's a 5-alarm fire ripping through college athletics. And some of you ADs out there just spent the July 4th weekend letting your deputies deliver the damage while you boarded your yachts. With it being a new fiscal year, we have officially entered the revenue sharing era. And with it, an exodus. Due to the House settlement, the NCAA's $20 million cap just went into effect to compensate athletes. And already, here's your highlight reel. Indiana, 25 jobs gone. Kansas, 8 to 10% staff cut. Oklahoma, 5% laid off. Michigan, a 10% staffing long-term cut. Arkansas, 2.5 million cut via administrative staff. Texas A&M, 4 million in job cuts. Even South Carolina, they're raising student fees to help foot the bill. And Olympic sports, they are getting nuked. We're only 1 week in and sports are being dropped by the minute. Bowling, tennis, baseball, volleyball, swimming, all gone. At places like Stephen F. Austin, Cal Poly, UTEP, Eastern Illinois, Purdue Fort Wayne, Grand Canyon, and the list keeps growing and growing and growing. Meanwhile, Ohio State's rumored to be building a $40 million football roster, and their general manager is making a cool $900K a year. You think these layoffs were unavoidable? Let me remind you, athletic departments don't run on athletic directors. They run on people working 80 hours a week for the logo, and holidays and family time because they cared. People who sold their souls, not stacked their bonuses. So let's talk leadership. Where are the ADs? They're not in the building, they're not in the meeting, they're not even on the damn calls. They're hiding behind deputy ADs, HR emails, and carefully worded press statements. If you're asking your lieutenants to cut 5 to 10% of your staff, you better have the stones to look each person in the eye. That's leadership. These aren't just job cuts, they're livelihoods, decades of service. So show your face, you cowards. And let's be clear, these layoffs, they're happening because of you. Years of reckless spending. The facility arms race, bloated coaching staffs, multi-million-dollar buyouts, salaries that ballooned while your staff was begging for cost of living raises. Oh, and remember that time you spent $250,000 on that cool locker room waterfall? And spare us the statement about taking a pay cut. You think anyone cares? You're still making 7 figures to steer the ship you ran aground. So here's some advice. If you're gonna gut your staff, at least do it with some human decency. Offer 3 to 6 months of severance in this job market. Pick up the phone, thank them, even if they hate your guts. Because what you're doing, you're tossing people overboard to save your own seat at the table. What I'm doing? I'm pouring one out for everyone who's been let go. The ones quietly being erased from the only career they've ever known. I've been there. The shock, the panic, the abandonment, not being able to pick yourself up off the ground. It's a mental mindfuck that doesn't go away anytime soon. So for everybody getting that call right now, you didn't deserve this, and you're not alone. And to the athletic directors not making those calls, grow a spine. Don't hide in the bunker until the smoke clears, because this fire, you helped light it.
You get it. The Stooche.
All right, we're going to keep it light for this next segment because it's the only way we know how to cope with the drama of working in sports. We're bringing on a longtime friend of the pod, a man who's seen it all and somehow lived to tell about it. That's right, Eric Stooche Jones is back. He's a man with a majestic mustache, I might add, and he made his debut back in episode 2, which feels like 2 decades ago, sharing a legendary story about a psychotic head coach who needed ticket sales updates on Christmas morning. If you're listening to this pod, chances are you've worked in sports long enough to know that the highs are high and the lowest are the lowest of lowest lows. Only an unpaid intern just starting in the business would understand, but years later, we are still here, still laughing, still trading stories from the trenches, like Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, usually in group texts that exclude HR because they are useless. These are the stories that kept us going, the ridiculous moments that made the chaos worth it, the ones we still pull out when we need a laugh. Eric Jones, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. It is certainly good to be back. I understand that you guys have really had some fun with this pod, and I don't know, I'll try to live up to what you guys have already started, you and Boggsy.
Does this make you potentially the Lou Gehrig of this podcast? Maybe we don't see Boggsy ever again?
So that would make Boggs, baseball history-wise, Wally Pipp, who got overtaken by Lou Gehrig. But no, I don't even know who would have been an interim in there, but I am definitely not the Lou Gehrig of this podcast. But I do appreciate the allusion to that, yes.
Well, we're just going to have to do our best today without Boggsy. And so we're kicking it off with a new segment that we thought you would be best for. We're calling it Wild Stories Working in Sports. Let's get into story number one, and we are coming in hot. There's nothing harder to deal with as a lowly paid employee than a full dose of entitlement, especially when it's coming from donors who think the rules don't apply to them just because they stuff the department's pockets, sort of. Most fans are great. Some are just a little too comfortable, treating staff like punching bags. Yo, Adrian, I didn't hear no bell. Eventually, you hit your limit. The line gets crossed one too many times. In this story, there were physical threats. There was a non apology. The AD kind of got involved, but not really. Let's flash back to good old National Signing Day. Where do I begin with this story? Because it involved me, allegedly. All of this is alleged. All of this is based on a fictional story, and none of it is true. So let's think about it for a minute. The absolute worst day of the year to work is National Signing Day. Around the clock prep for a week straight to get ready for that first Tuesday in February. All to celebrate a bunch of high schoolers who haven't even played a snap. We'd post around 3 to 4 pieces of content every 15 minutes from 7 a.m. to early afternoon. It's a wild, wild experience, a total brain drainer. By the end of the day, you feel some relief, especially when you're the smallest school in the conference competing with the Georgias and Alabamas of the world who have 3 to 4 times the content staffing. And then you see a submission in your email inbox coming from the website Contact Us form. What could it be? Oh, I know. Same old school, all caps. We can't hear the press conference questions. You should be fired. You're worthless. Something to that effect, allegedly. Hey, look, when you're doing these jobs, especially in sports, you have to learn to have thick skin. I tried to ignore this fan's 20 prior submissions over the years, always shitting on staff and bragging that they were a big donor, which I later found out was not actually the case. But this time, I could not let this email go. So I sent a response to this keyboard warrior, matter of fact, and maybe a little cheeky. Here's what I said. You know what? Reading all your submissions, it doesn't seem like you're getting much joy out of being a fan of our school. I'd recommend that you find a new hobby, one that actually makes you happy. Apparently, this was pouring gasoline on the fire, folks. The fan wrote back immediately, I'm coming down to the building right now to kick your ass. And that's when shit officially hit the fan, and this became a big situation. And as a young staffer at the time, I learned a lot from this one, and especially how to better handle this specific situation. EJ, this set off a chain reaction within the department. What do you remember from my one shining moment?
I remember when it came in, the first thing I did was talk to the staff around me and was like, all right, what do we know about this person? And, not surprisingly, this person had been a jackass to a lot of people, and in person. So, on my side of things, I was in a ticket office situation, and you always got to deal with the public on, what I've said previously, not their best day. But this is a different situation in college athletics. You always got to watch yourself, because then you have to look at, is this person a donor? So if they're a season ticket holder and a donor, you've got to do your homework. And that's a thing that I think the keyboard warriors never really think about, is that it takes all of us to get something produced, to get a football game, a basketball game, a track and field event, in itself produced. And so the first thing we did, Barca, I remember it so well, is we asked each other, what do you got on this person? I think the one thing that it did for me was just really bring into effect how we're not taken as human beings in some cases when you work on an athletic or even an entertainment side of things. People are always seeing you as, I'm paying for your salary, right? And I think this was one of those moments when not this person's best day, National Signing Day. I think you would probably admit, Barca, that you'd been up for a lot of hours.
3 straight days, not my best day either.
I do remember on that day that we banded together after we swapped stories about, okay, this is what this person, yeah, he's been a jackass to, the person at the gate, or yeah, he's been a jackass to the person in the parking lot before he even got there. So it was one of those things that we had to get together, work together, and get out of it with as much of a solution as possible, because there were expectations, right, of the athletic director who really had washed his hands of it. And most athletic directors, he or she will wash their hands of it, and they'll say, you need to be able to take these things down. You're on the front lines. But I do remember we were waiting. We were waiting and ready for this person to show up.
I was ready to get my ass kicked.
Yeah, I mean, and you're mad about it, but it also caused anxiety, right? Because we went over and talked about it, and then, gosh, I mean, we got people from donorship side saying how big of a deal that was, and as you kind of referenced, they weren't that high of a donor, and had kind of acted like they were. You got to be careful of how it's going to be interpreted on the message boards. I felt for you on that day, but I do remember all of us being like, hey, did you hear this that came over? We're going to possibly have him coming in. Let us know. We're not going to let him upstairs. We're not going to let her upstairs. Can't have this person. We're going to keep him outside in the parking lot. She can scream out in the parking lot, but we got, all of these things came into it. And I'll tell you, if one thing came to it for me, it was how we all kind of banded together to say, yeah, you know what? This person is just at the very least way over the top. But in another case, do we really, became the question, do we need this type of a fan in our program? And at the time, our fan base was, small, and it was a very vocal minority. But I remember that specifically. Listen, we could lose this person. What's the fallout of that? In the end, I think that we made some really good discussion points that became, all right, if this happens, this is how we're going to treat it. Long after, I think we did say, we named that type of a situation. So it would get to be, is this a, Eric Jones situation? Is this a coming here to kick our ass situation? That became kind of the lore of what it was. Was it a way to kind of get back to square one? I don't know. I don't know that it really matters. I certainly don't think it matters in that person's life. And as you pointed out, we just kind of laugh about it now. So, it is a fan, and the entitlement is, I give a donation, I pay money. You guys have to listen to what I have to say. And more so, you have to do what I tell you, because you're wrong and you're terrible.
I fell, what you'd call now like the troll job. I fell for it. Obviously, like I said before, this was a common name that would come through the website contact us inbox, just pissed off about everything that was wrong about the department. And granted, some of that stuff was right, and a lot of that stuff was out of my control. And I did actually feel like I had a very strong relationship with the fan base, even through the message boards. This was probably prior to social media channels launching. So I had built up a lot of goodwill, not only in the department, but also with the fan base. And so I regretted that part. It helped me out a little bit internally. I wasn't a bad seed when it came to this. And then obviously him threatening to kick my ass, I look back at it now, I didn't do anything about it. I didn't report it to the authorities. I probably was just very oblivious. I didn't care. What I cared about is that, okay, the situation had escalated to where now it called out a fan, and now I'm going to have to sit at the table and answer to it. That's the part that I was concerned about and wish I'd handled better. What I should have really emphasized was the assault aspect of it. And I didn't take it seriously because I thought it was just schoolyard talk and wasn't a big deal. And it probably didn't help out this donor, because part of the story is him making this extreme threat to me. And so actually it probably helped me out a little bit. I was not aware of other issues in the department that the department had with this person, or the amount of donor that they were. I just knew, I was like, you know what? This isn't making you happy. It doesn't seem to be. So try finding something else. Try finding something else to do, which was the wrong way to approach it. I was at a moment of weakness. Again, I hadn't slept probably for 3 straight days. Signing day back in the day was insane. And so basically the next steps moving forward, I remember obviously talking to my direct boss And then at some point, the person over all of our fundraising pulled me aside and was just like, nicest guy. And I think back to this situation, if I'm the AD, I'm probably saying, no matter who it is, if it's our website coordinator or whoever, I'm saying he needs to apologize and he needs to apologize now and he needs to suck it up. But they didn't approach it that way with me. And so they left me a little wiggle room. And so they came to me and said, not the AD, but the person overseeing all of fundraising, and said, hey, would you be willing just to kind of smooth out the situation and talk to this fan again? And I was extremely stubborn in my 20s. I am now, if you know me, but I was a different kind of person in my 20s. And so I was like, all right, I'll do you a solid. I'll talk to this fan. So actually called the fan up a couple days later. They had been awaiting my call. And I said, you know, I wish I would have handled myself better in this situation. I think probably you would feel the same way based on your actions. And this is where I was coming from. And it had been a lot of work we put into signing day. Even from the press conference end, I had such a high level that I was working towards, to where running live streaming press conferences was not actually in my technical job description. I was doing it and providing the service for free. And I agreed with the fan. I wanted to get all the questions in the room, but I didn't have the setup or the resources or the staffing along my side to help me do that. But the fact that we were still streaming it at that time, which a lot of people weren't, to me was actually a pretty big victory. And so it was a little frustrating. But so I called the fan, explained that. And then the first thing he says after that is, so you're going to apologize? I said, no, I'm not apologizing. I'm just saying I should have handled it better. All right, so no apology. And then basically hung up.
To me, Barca, it's kind of like, okay, if I grudgingly give you an apology, everything's fine. Okay, sorry. I don't mean it, but sorry. I don't get it. And I think some people that might be listening to these type of stories might say, okay, yeah, but what about when it's the biggest donor and it does matter and you do have to apologize? And in that case, like you said, some time has passed. Okay, I'll apologize for how it was done. The wild part of this story is the extreme. And you hit it on the head. You never did ask for any kind of campus police or anything like that. In these times, if you're doing this again, yeah, that anything could happen in 2025.
Completely different in 2025. 2006, it was like, oh yeah, this is just typical behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And I do think that the severity of it, things are taken a lot more serious now. I think that we probably should have taken it more seriously then, but the postscript to this is, I think that person is still a fan, got their feelings hurt, and went on and mouthed off more on the message boards or whatever. Nothing came to fruition, but it's one of those wild stories that you're like, could there have been a confrontation? Absolutely. What were we doing to? Yeah. I mean, you don't know how crazy fans can be. And the fact that all of these donations and fees are going up to pay the athletes, they're having to pay more to go to the games. There's some expectations there that they get to say as much as they want, no matter how demoralizing what they say or offensive they say is. I paid my money, now you're going to have to listen to me. It is part of the entertainment side of things, sports particularly, but that was definitely a crazy incident. And I just remember everybody coming in and saying, yeah, we don't need to worry about this person. Then we had a lot more information about what kind of an individual this person really was.
I couldn't believe it. And hey, look, I'm going to do something right now. This is not even in the script. I'm going to apologize. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I'm being serious. This is not a sarcastic apology. I am sorry. I let it get the best of me. I didn't control my actions. I sent off an email that I should not have at a very weak moment, that I needed to be better. And I wasn't. And so looking back, I effed it up. I effed it up and should have had thick skin. And it's one of those where you have one of those moments, sometimes 100 different times you do it differently. And then that one catches you at the wrong time and you act up. And honestly, I deserved to have been reprimanded in that situation. I'm thankful for the superiors around me for supporting me and sticking up for me. I mean, I remember I had a lot of people behind the scenes and I didn't ask for it, obviously. And honestly, back then, I didn't want to be a topic of conversation around the building because of something like this. That just wasn't me. I was passionate about my job. I loved what I did. And this was just not representative of who I was. And so I apologize for it. But I do remember some people, not that it makes it any better. I just had a lot of people that came up to me behind the scenes and saying, you know what, Brandon, you said what a lot of us have been wanting to say for a long, long time. And so from that, I was like, okay, well, I've always been someone that's had some stones, and maybe it's the part of Italian in me that's just like the meme that they do, fuck around, find out. And again, I should have been penalized for that. 15 yards, personal foul. I apologize, coach. Well, that was our first wild story. We are not done yet. Wild stories working in sports part 2. We've got another one here with Eric Jones, and this one's not about entitled fans. This time it's about when the department turns on its own, when your so-called teammates turn into cellmates. And the next thing you know, there's almost a brawl in the yard. A classic case of leadership making a not so smart decision, then leaving the staff to deal with the fallout. So let me set this up. An athletic staffer gets enlisted to ticket the department's own staff parking lots, and it nearly turns into a full-blown melee in the front lobby. This one's all you, buddy.
Well, I happen to be in close proximity when this happens, but I've talked to one of the people very recently that was in this altercation. It happens a lot when you put people in your organization in a bad situation or a situation that has a chance to go sideways pretty quickly, especially if they're not trained to do it, if it's something where they don't have time to do it, and most importantly, if it is a morale thing, right? Because, I mean, Barca, the biggest thing we ever pushed, and I pushed for it with so many ice cream cakes, was culture. You're working a lot of hours, right? And you work with these folks in season. You're working 70 to 80 hours. You got to be able to have a sense of humor about it, but you also got to be able to treat people well. You celebrate the little things. You celebrate, like we talked about the first time you guys had me on, the birthdays, the anniversaries, cases, divorces. You celebrate whatever is out there. But the other side of it is when there are decisions that are made that are going to really stress your culture. And in this case, we did have a small parking lot at one of the places where we worked, and it was controlled by the department. And I think they wanted to control it by department so that you could have parking for people coming in to make ticket purchases or people coming in to make donations to the fundraising.
Or to make sure staff had spots.
Yeah. I mean, just, to try to do something nice for your staff. In this case, we even had an employee of the month that got it for a full month. So, and it went away, and that was another reason people got mad. But, in this case, anybody and everybody was parking in there and would stay there pretty much for a duration. So you had student athletes coming in. You had people that were just going to lunch that would park there. You had all kinds of people.
Yeah, everybody was getting ticketed. Staff, student athletes, fans. That was the lot to get you straight to the ticket office, and there were some reserved ticketing spots. So everybody was getting ticketed. They were being ticketed not by the university, but by someone that was enlisted on our own ops staff to go out there during the day and write tickets, which is a horrible situation for somebody to face.
Everybody was getting ticketed. And so this particular time, as it happens, you get somebody that was kind of in your place in the previous story where you had not had a lot of sleep. Maybe this person had some things going on in their life. The one person coming in had just written a ticket. The other person going out saw them do it. It got into a shouting match. It got ugly. And it so did not have to happen that way.
July 4th fireworks.
Yeah, I'm going to take this out on you because you did me wrong by writing a ticket.
I mean, it was an all-out shouting match that ended up drawing the attention of a lot of offices out there that overlooked the lobby. And so it became a very open public scene.
Everybody heard it, or everybody cracked open their door to see what was going on. People came out of a meeting that was going on with the athletic director and were like, what are you guys doing? What are you people doing? Stop this. And in the grand scheme of things, the member of our team that had written the ticket said, go and talk to my supervisor. Maybe do something about it. Go and talk to my supervisor. Just stayed on that. Putting someone into that type of a situation, especially internally when it's staff against staff, is horrible. Never should have been in that situation, but it happened. And it's still something that when I talked to this person, actually last night, I wanted to prepare for this because, I want to do a good job for Boggsy. I was like, was there ever a thought in your mind that you might seriously get your ass beaten? And he goes, oh, absolutely. He said the guy was bigger than me. He goes, absolutely. But I didn't know what else to do. And the person's just yelling. And that's a place, Brandon, where you just don't know. You don't know the narrative. What happened before he got in there? What's been going on? That thing could have gone horribly bad, right? And there's not a police officer. It's just us in the ticket office or a receptionist. I mean, just a terrible thing to do, but one of those things because somebody wanted control, didn't want the rest of the organization to have control of the parking. And who knows, maybe even wanted to make some extra money off the tickets. I don't know, but just a horrible thing to do to somebody that you work with. I would imagine that this kind of thing happens pretty much commonplace every day, but usually it's done by, security forces. It's not done by somebody in operations in an office that awkwardly will have to see that person all the time in the hallway. Never want to do that for your culture. It's easily the best one that I can think of right now. The best incidents of you don't ever want to do this. This should be in the textbook of how not to create your internal culture. Don't ask people to do horrible jobs.
This could have been avoided. It was, again, the environment and the culture that was set up by the department, unfortunately. You mentioned it briefly, the employee of the month spot. This lot, for a time period, actually had a reserved spot for the employee of the month. And then it got taken away at some point. Don't know the full reason why. I know that when I had been awarded it, I like to give other people on our staff the ability to park there. And so I would share mine. I'm sure that probably wasn't looked at well, but you know what? I was given the spot for that month. So I should be able to do whatever the hell I want to with fellow staff members that I felt like helped me succeed that month. We're a team, right? We're all in the trenches together. And at some point it was taken away. And I remember the award overall, even this is the thing that cracks me up about sports. And I had this happen multiple places with employee of the month awards is after a while, they get tired of seeing all the submissions and they determine, well, that's part of their normal job. Only do submissions moving forward of things that are outside your job duties. And you're sitting there having worked an 80-hour week and thinking like, what time do I have outside of this actual job to do extra things to be employee of the month? So that spot got taken away, which actually was a really, really nice perk. Oh, but we kept the birthday cake party celebrations for the people that have birthdays in April and May, the bare minimum. And guess who got their own spot as well? The athletic director. Things like that would happen, and you'd be like, man, this is really messed up. How do you make a decision and then pull back on your staff and say, you know what, we're changing this award, and also no more parking spot for you? All right, let's move on to Wild Stories Working in Sports, Part 3. In sports, you're going to meet some of the most dedicated volunteers and hourly game day staff. And a lot of times they're senior citizens, retired from their day jobs, but bleeding school colors and showing up every game like it's the Super Bowl. They do it for the love of the game. We really did have some amazing folks who helped with media meals in the press box and kept a lid on reporters trying to hoard extra Chick-fil-A sandwiches. I mean, I'd try it.
We did try it.
But even some that would try to smuggle out full meals from the press box using their brought from home Tupperware. Yes, this actually happened. This is a true story, but this is not the wild story I'm getting ready to tell. One of these volunteers, sorry, the Tupperware story is just, it's a this is a story in its own.
I know, but it's true.
One of those volunteers, a gentleman who had served as a basketball team manager back in the 1950s, took serious pride in this role. And for this specific one, he wanted to make sure this head coach had her specific drink of choice waiting on her at the post game press conference podium. That drink? A Fresca. Every game like clockwork. Now, a little backstory on this coach. This was a person who chewed up SIDs season after season, and most of these poor comms people didn't last more than a year or two. So, EJ, what do you remember happened next? Paint the picture for us in this press conference and this Fresca.
Some of the best people, salt of the earth people, are going to be people that are going to get paid hourly on game days, or in some cases, not at all, just because they love being around team concept and the student athletes, but they take a lot of pride in their work. We all should, but sometime along the line, we kind of forget that. This story, Barca, you and I were talking about different things that we remembered collectively, how people were treated, and, was specifically near and dear to me because one of my jobs was to go and address the game day staff. Most of the game day staff, retirement age, some of their jobs were to look at the Chick-fil-A sandwiches to make sure that everybody had a chance to get one. In this particular case, yes, this person had been a basketball manager in the 50s. We had plenty of these type stories. They were delightful people. I mean, took their jobs extremely seriously. And in this case, I don't even remember how they found out that Fresca, one of the worst beverages ever put out. I mean, I'll put it out there with Tab and New Coke. I think Fresca is like a grapefruit diet type thing. I don't even know how it was found out that this coach liked Fresca. So whether it's a win or a loss, I'm going to make sure there's this refreshing beverage that's there in the press conference, right there in front of her, and I'm going to open it for her so that it'll be right there. Comes in, sits down. I don't even remember if it was a win or a loss. This person would always come and sit in the back, just so enamored with this coach that the rest of us knew was tough to deal with. All I know is it was not a very long, there were maybe 4, 5, 6 questions, and basically got up to go, had not touched the Fresca, got up to go, and, angrily, you kick back those metal trays like you got at press conferences, and it makes a noise. Happened to knock the table a little bit. The SID at the time kind of came up and handed it. Don't forget this is yours. And the coach just looks at it, takes it, doesn't say a word, walking off the podium, and just chucks it into a trash can. Just chucks it.
The ultimate disrespect.
And I happen to look at the person, and the look on that person's face, it was sadness.
Somebody had just murdered his dog is what he looked like.
Years later, when Anchorman came out, I thought of myself, and I'm like, that's what Ron Burgundy's face looked like when Jack Black kicked his dog into the river.
You hit me with a burrito, man. Baxter.
After that, I left the room because what am I going to do? I'm not there for anything except to see the spectacle of it, right? I got back to the media room where all the food was. It hurt this guy's feelings. I mean, he's talking to his assistant going after all of that. And he took his money to buy it, just shattered. And from that point on, I think that person was this coach's biggest distractor.
I was in there filming the press conference, and I couldn't believe it myself. It looked like the veins popping through this volunteer worker's forehead and just sweat coming down and just shaking, sort of like when Beavis turns into Cornholio. And it was also the way that the Fresca was thrown away. Not a sip was taken, like you said, at the podium. And the coach just makes her way to the trash can. It was so dramatic, the way that it was thrown in there. It wasn't just lightly placed in there. It was like she stopped and made a scene out of it. But it was such a disrespectful act, unfortunately, for this worker having to experience it. I mean, he had probably went out and checked 8 different gas stations or convenience stores to find this case of Fresca. And he probably had his own little Coke fridge in the corner somewhere with a couple of locks on it to make sure that nobody could infiltrate these Frescas and that coach was going to get him nice and cold as she had probably asked for at the start of her press conferences. I remember just feeling really upset and angry for a coach who gave zero shits about the effort and work that someone had put into that. And like I said, this person chewed up SIDs year in and year out and just was a miserable person to work with and to be around.
Again, if you build yourself a culture in wherever you are, you got to build it on the relationships you're making with people. I was extremely honored to be able to go and do each year some of the usher training. And they're some of the best group of people that I've ever worked with. I always went to those training sessions each year before football season. And I always did the Patrick Swayze from Roadhouse. And I'd get through everything and I'm like, and the last thing, be nice. Just be nice. If they say something mean to you, just be nice.
Let's talk about this story with Mr. Hood, an usher who was just the sweetest elderly gentleman. It was one of my favorite parts of working game days for football in the stadium. He'd be stationed in the elevator that would go down into the lower bowels of the football stadium, only where the feral cats would live. And we would take it and we would go up. I'd always get to see him at the start of the day, up to the press box, had a smile on his face, and I would see him at the end of the day. And so in this football press box, there were only 2 elevators. And one of the elevators was dominated mostly by all of the donor levels. And then the other elevator was game day staff and transporting the coaches from both teams that worked up in the press box up and down. And I'm going to let you tell this story because it was cracking me up the other day. But one of the things that always happens for one of these elevators is with 5 minutes left in the first half and then also in the fourth quarter, one elevator needs to technically be shut down and held to where normal people like you and me would not be allowed to access it. Right at the final whistle going into the half or right at the final whistle at the end of the game, the coaching staff's up in the box. Typically there'd be 5 to 10 people in each box would need to get transported down to the field immediately to either meet with their coaches at halftime, which is extremely important because halftimes are only 20 minutes, or to get out of there at the end of the game to, again, meet with their team and the coaches on the field to celebrate. But this one specific time, it didn't happen, and it was an honest mistake, and I love Mr. Hood to death, and this story just kills me, so I'll let you tell it.
You get to meet and work with some really special people. And for me, Mr. Hood was one of those people. He had been, long time at the school. I think he used to sell game programs back in the day. He'd been there for well over 50 years. And he had some great stories. He was always the first to greet people. As he got older, it got harder for him to hear. We used to joke, that's probably good because, people are constantly bitching back and forth, right? One of the most helpful, thoughtful people I've ever been around. He's in that elevator, and that's where he is the whole game. Terrible job, by the way, but one that was good for him, especially as he got older, keep him out of the cold. We had a new police officer that was working underneath the stadium that would allow the coaches to not have to go through the stands, okay? So you could go down the elevator and get to locker rooms, halftime, and after the game, just like he said. Well, Mr. Hood was told you can go home early. So he was like, all right, great. He's like, this is awesome. And he had this really high pitched voice and he's like, all right, my friend, I'll see you later. And so he rides down in the elevator. And when you ride the elevator all the way down and it gets to the lowest point, you can lock it open. And so the police officer was down there. He said, this is before the end of the game. And he says, well, all right, I'll see you next time. And he says, all right, my friend, I'll see you later. I'm going to get home. And, he goes and he locks it down so the doors are open. And then he turns the light off. And the police officer told me, he said, he was going home. And so it's locked down at the lowest point of the stadium. And that means lockdown. That means it can't be called back up unless somebody downstairs is down there to be able to flip the unlock switch inside the dark car of the elevator. And so he went home, and they kept waiting at the end of the game for the car to come up, and it never came up. And so I guess the officer had moved on to traffic duty or whatever, but I remember he told somebody after the game, because everybody had heard about it, and everybody was laughing because the coaches from the other team are just incensed. They're sitting there waiting. They're like, why are we waiting here? We got to be down in that post-game locker room. So finally, somebody up there said, and it's, what was it, BB? Maybe 4 flights up, okay? They're like, well, you could go down through the crowd.
There's a hike.
Could go down the stairs. And so they were like, we're not doing that. We got to get down there. We're like, well, the other one is used to bringing back and forth people from the suites. You could go down the suite level. And of course, those coaches did not want to do that. That was the one time Mr. Hood went home early because they told him to. He became a legend in my mind because that guy, not a mean bone in his body, but evidently those coaches had been kind of demanding and kind of jerkish the whole time.
I loved seeing him. I always wanted he's the first person I tried to find on game days when I would go to work in a press box.
Oh.
And that story is completely legendary. The way I remember it, the coaches, I think, actually did have to go down through the stairwell and then underneath the press box to actually go through the stands, through the donor section and onto the field. And they were pissed, as most coaches do. And the same way the coach apparently in the press conference was pissed about having a Fresca. And you know what? These coaches are allowed to have tantrums like 5-year-olds, and they get away with it. They definitely don't like to be checked on any of it. So there you have it, people. Those are some of the wildest stories of working in sports. Just a couple we wanted to share today that EJ was grateful enough to share with us. We will have more of these stories in the future. Most of it will depend on how much our old memories can even remember, because some of these stories I didn't remember until you brought them up.
I really appreciate you letting me sub in on this one. I'm really hoping for Boggsy to heal well. I hope we do get back to some stories all of us have, because as much as what you've done on your pod, and it's been great, a place for people to commiserate, but also to celebrate themselves, you got to keep laughing. You got to keep your sense of humor, the relationships that you make and you carry forward with people. Eventually, those may be the only things that sustain you, that you were good at your job working in sport.
Time to wrap it up.
And that's another edition of No Longer Credentialed. Thanks to all of you listening, and if you like it, tell a friend and give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app of choice. Don't forget to check us out on social media at NLC Pod on X, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. Until next week, keep grinding.
People, listen, it only took us, 3 hours to figure out how to get this podcast recording off-site today.
It's super easy to do a podcast. It's super hard to make the podcast sound professional. I don't know if we'll eclipse that bar today, but maybe.
It's going to be tough without Boggsy. No disrespect.
I hope he is feeling better, getting some rest.
He just has that professional voice that we all aspire to.
He really does. I don't do it justice. Maybe I won't do that. Or maybe I will. Andale.
Andale, Boggsy. Escúchame, Boggsy. Siéntate, Boggsy. El Boggsito. Brought to you by a Boggsy Vision.